Now that we have a level, I want to connect the laser to it. And this is going to mean a couple of things. Most importantly, I want the laser to disappear when it is colliding with a wall or an object. On top of that, if it is colliding with an enemy, it should trigger a function. For now, this function is going to do very much. Later on, when we work on the enemies, all of that will be much more elaborate. On top of that, there's one more thing I want to cover. And that is that the laser should disappear after a certain amount of time. That is important because I want to make sure that we cannot have infinite lasers. And the reason, I think, is best explained if I look at all of this in Godot. Back in the editor, I want to run the game, although I don't really care about the game. I want to look at remote, there we have the level, and there we have projectile. This right now has nothing in it. However, if I go back to the game and I simply shoot in one direction, we now get a whole bunch of children, and this can go on forever. Which is fine for the game, and for this kind of 2D game, it wouldn't cause a problem. That being said, if you have a more elaborate game, where you work with 3D objects, where things get much more complicated, you want to have a limit on how many objects you have in the game. Just imagine that the more objects you are creating, the more your computer has to process. So we want to have a limit on how many we can have. And for that, we want to have a timer that even if the laser doesn't hit anything, we still want to get rid of it after some amount of time. Now, for all of that, we have to work inside of the laser. So let me open the scene with Control or Command Shift and O. I can open the laser. And there we have a laser, and the laser has a script. We are simply creating a speed and a direction, which by default is up. And then inside of process, we are updating the position of this area to the. And then inside of the level, when we are creating all of this, inside of the onPlayer laser function, we are setting a position for the laser, a rotation, and a direction. So now we have to create a few more things. Most importantly, whenever this laser collides with a static object, then we want to destroy it. Which means inside of node, we want to look at body entered. Body entered because the area is going to collide with bodies, which are static objects or character bodies. So this I want to connect to the laser, and now we have a function. What we could be doing in here, for example, is print, and let's say collision. Now, if I run the game again, I can shoot at a wall, and we get collision. To be a bit more detailed, we can also print the body this laser is colliding with. So if I now do this again, we get a collision with the gate. And if I shoot in this direction, we get collision with the tile map, and this multiple times. So if I click on this, we get a whole bunch more. And this seems to be working just fine. That being said though, for this game, I don't want to print anything. I want to destroy the laser. And this we can do quite easily. All we need is the command Q3. This is destroying a node, and that is exactly what we want to do. If I run the game and I shoot at a wall, the laser simply disappears. The same works with the steam vents, and the same is going to work with these walls as well. With that, we have covered the first part, that now the laser is going to disappear once it collides with a static object. But this is not enough, because if I go back to the level and minimize everything, what I now want to do is add another scene. And the scene I want to add, if I click on Control Shift and A, I want to add a drone scene to my level. Let's say somewhere here. And now, if I run the game, the drone is going to move to the right, and if I shoot at it, the laser is also going to disappear. So this one is still working just fine. But now, what I ultimately want to do is that if the laser is colliding with this drone, I want to call a function. And for that, we have to figure out inside of the script on the laser, we want to get the body, which could either be a static object or an enemy. And on this body, we want to call a function if the body has certain attributes. For example, if the body belongs to an enemy. The way I approach all of that is, inside of the drone, we have a process function, and I want to create another function. I call this one function hit. It doesn't have any parameters, and all it is going to do for now, it is going to print, let's say, damage. Doesn't really matter what it is. What I now want to do inside of the laser, I want to call this hit function. What we can be doing quite easily is we can get the body and then call the hit method on it. And this would already work. So if I now run all of this and I shoot at the drone, we get damage. So this is working just fine. The problem is if I shoot at anything else, the game is crashing because we have a non-existent function hit in base static body 2D, which basically means that this method doesn't exist inside of a static body, which is the Steam vent. To fix that, we have to check if the body has a hit method or not. The easiest one would be with if, then the body, and then the inbuilt method has method. I don't suppose I have to explain what this one is doing. The one argument that this method wants is a name of a function. In our case, this would be hit. And if that is the case, I want to call this method. And now, if I run all of this again, I can shoot at a drone. It is still working just fine. But if I shoot at anything else, we are not getting an error anymore. And that is because this if statement is not triggering, which is basically covering the other aspect of the assignment. So now we can trigger a function if we're hitting an enemy with a laser. Although you don't actually see this kind of method being used all that often, because Godot has a simpler way of doing all of that. All you have to do, if I get rid of it, you have to check if the function or property, in this case hit, is in the body. The result would be the same. So if I now run all of this again, I can still shoot at the drone, we get damage, and if I shoot at anything else, we don't get anything. So this is the same outcome, but a bit easier. Also more powerful, because with this syntax, you can check if a method, like hit, or a property is inside of a node. For example, what I could be doing inside of the drone, I could create an attribute. Let's say var is enemy, and this would be a boolean, which by default is true. This notably is an attribute, not a method. So we cannot call it. But inside of the laser, we don't really care about it. We could simply check if is enemy is in the body, then we can print is an enemy. If I now run this again, I can shoot at it, and we get is an enemy. And this we don't get anywhere else. Although this isn't actually what I want to do. So I'm going to get rid of it. Also in the drone, we don't want to check if this is an enemy. Cool, with that, we have another really important bit. Now we can call a method on an enemy, and we can also get rid of the laser if we have a static object. Now, we have another way to damage an enemy, and that is via a grenade. And for now, I'm going to ignore this one, because later on we have to cover another concept to make all of this work efficiently. So don't worry about this one for now. Finally, I want to create the third part, and that is that we want to get rid of the laser after a certain amount of time, even if it doesn't hit anything. And that is going to be your exercise. Basically, what I want you guys to do is to use a timer to destroy the laser after 2 seconds, or basically whatever amount of time you think is appropriate. Pause the video now and try to implement this one. Back in Godot, I want to keep on working in the laser, and since we now want to use a timer, I have to attach to this laser another node, which would be a timer. I'm going to call this the self-destruct timer. This self-destruct timer inside of the inspector is going to have a wait time of 2 seconds. One shot should be enabled, but auto start should not be enabled. Once we have that, inside of this script, we basically want to start this timer once the node has been created. And for that, we will need the ready function. So func_ready. And once it is ready, I want to get the self-destruct timer and then start it. That's the first part. The second part is once the timer is running out, then I want to call the timeout method and connect it to the laser. All this one has to do, if I get rid of pass, we want to Q3, meaning we want to destroy this node. And with that, we should be done. So now if I run this, I can shoot all the way to the right. And if I now look at remote level projectiles. Right now it's empty. Let's try this again. We get a laser for a short period of time. So there we have a laser, and there it disappears. And this to the player would never be visible because the laser leaves the screen really quickly. But, well, we make sure that we never have too many lasers. And with that, we have connected our laser to the level scene, which is another major part of the game. So with that, we have made a huge amount of progress.